Well, as I say, first of all, Mark, Richardson, thank you very much indeed for joining us
More than welcome.
for Cherry Trees. It's probably best if you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Mark Richardson. I'm the drummer with Skunk Anansie and also a vulnerability coach and an addiction recovery coach. In about 2000, I was struggling with my relationship with my then wife and my newborn son. I'd always drank quite a lot, but it'd never really been a problem. It was the days before binge drinking was a thing, and the days before mental health issues were talked about openly. And because I had no tools to deal with the difficulties that were going on in my personal life, I drank more, I got more and more depressed, and sort of sank into this kind of abyss where I had nobody to talk to. The only way I could deal with it was by drinking. There were other issues as well. Drugs were an issue for me. I slowly but surely sort of declined, and things hit a rock bottom, as they sort of very often do in these situations, where I was sick and tired of just feeling sick and tired all the time, and I wanted to just turn the lights out, and just end it. But I don't want to say I didn't have the courage to do that, but it was almost like, it was sort of like that, but it was also like at the same time I knew that wasn't the solution. So I clung on and I clung on and I clung on. And eventually I found, I got some help finding a therapist that basically said to me, "You're an alcoholic, you need to go to AA." So I tried AA, and I went in and out for 3 years, I went in and out for 3 years until I heard someone speak, and they basically sort of were talking about themselves, but I had so much identification with how they were speaking that I talked to them afterwards and talked to them about how they knew me so well, when I'd never even met them. And essentially what I was hearing was a vulnerability. He was being really honest about how alcohol had affected him and his life. He was putting it out there. He was talking about his problems in a public forum. And that man became my sponsor. He took me through the 12 steps of AA, and then my journey in sobriety really began. But I suppose for the purposes of this video, what the crux of that was I witnessed another man being vulnerable about the way he felt, which is not something that I didn't grow up with that example, really. I was never told to not feel or not cry, but it was just the culture that I grew up in. And I think this is probably, it's a common thing. Men are just not encouraged to talk about how they feel because it's perceived as a weakness. And actually my experience of vulnerability is that it saved my life, and it's actually courage. It's a very courageous thing to do, to talk about the way you feel in a public forum, as a man, because it's just not seen, it's just not the done thing, It's sort of, you just kind of man up and get on with it, or, you pull yourself together and and you crack on kind of thing. That was the sort of culture I grew up in. Now, there's nothing particularly harmful or abusive about that, because it's just a normality. But what it doesn't allow for is for the expression of the person to talk about the innate way they feel. And that process is what saved my life. It was being able to say, I feel XYZ. Essentially, when I started going to AA meetings and talking about my struggles, that's when my life started to get better. I think what saved me was being given a safe place to share and permission to share what was going on for me personally, without being shamed, without being ridiculed, without being told it's weak, without being told to man up and get on with it. And that's what, as a coach, that's what I provide for my clients, is I give permission to say whatever it is that you need to say to move forward. There's no judgment, there's no shaming, there's not even any real sort of, nothing else really to it other than that. I mean, it really is a kind of, I don't know, you can see the relief on the face of somebody who's held something in for so long, who's finally talking about it. You can just see the relief. Like, oh, I said my deepest, I talked about my deepest, darkest secret, and nothing's happened. I'm still here, you know. I mean, there's always going to be those that judge. There's always going to be those that think it's weak. There's always going to be those that, you know, are going to continue the mantra of, you know, man up and get on with it. My experience of that is it's just not helpful. What was happening in my life was we're creating very powerful emotions that I didn't know what to do with. So I drank to change that, you know, to change the way I felt and to reduce that feelings. The problem with alcohol is that it wears off, and those problems are still there. So when I started talking therapies and started going to AA, and I was given permission and space to share what was going on for me, to share how I felt, those feelings were let out, they were aired, and so the emotional attachment to them was reduced. So I no longer needed to numb those feelings with, you know, I no longer needed to medicate those feelings.
So addressing the issues that were the root.
Addressing the issues is a separate thing. It actually initially just being vulnerable enough to talk about how I felt initially was enough to take the power out of those feelings. Now, long term, you're talking about a different thing. There is deeper work to do. There's familial work to do. There's, you know, for some, there's a million different combinations of addictions, of processes, of you know, abuses, and all that kind of thing that can be dealt with a professional. But what all of these things have in common is you're given a space to talk about, to be vulnerable about the way you feel. And that point is what changed my life. It's like, oh, okay, I don't have to hold all of this in, and I don't have to kill myself. I can talk about it, and I can stay alive. You know, essentially, that's what we're talking about here. You know, given that male suicide of men my age, you know, 47 to 50, is the biggest, suicide's the biggest killer, you know, and that, there's a reason for that. And I suspect the reason for that is that we are not taught to deal with how we feel enough. Obviously, there's always exceptions to the rule, but in general, I think we're not as men aren't encouraged to talk about the way they feel. And you know, even just to say in a social situation, when somebody is nasty or sarcastic, you know, to say, you know, that's not okay to say that. When you say that, it makes me feel sad or ashamed or belittled, or, you know, very difficult things.
That is difficult
to do in a social setting. But once you do it, I did it only this morning. You know, it's I I just said to someone, you know, it's not okay to say that.
What was the response?
Embarrassed, apologetic, maybe a bit ashamed, but that's okay. That's for him to deal with, and for him, you know, to sort of, that's his stuff. But what's my stuff is, now I'm recovered sufficiently in order to take care of how I am in the day, so that I don't regress back to stuffing down feelings, or is I need to keep my side of the street clean. And the way I do that is by very gently and very kindly saying that something is or isn't okay, and the opposite as well is by saying, you know, that was a really lovely thing that you did. And saying that to a bloke can take them by surprise, you know, and a lot of the time, if they don't have any awareness around that sort of thing, they might, you know, like, oh, what's going on here? You know, this is a bit touchy-feely. But that's, you know, I'm not saying that this is for everybody. It's not. It's for people that are struggling, that don't have, actually, it is for everybody. It could be for everybody if they want it. Yeah. But what tends to happen is when men find themselves in emotional difficulty and they don't know how to escape, they'll try to change the way they feel in some way. You know, some of those ways are damaging and destructive, and, you know, some of those ways are healthy and productive. So all I've done is I've changed from damaging and destructive to healthy and productive, and that's made a massive difference to my life. It's made a massive difference to the people around me. It's made a huge difference to my male friends who, you know, now are more likely to call me up and talk about their difficulties. I have one with a newborn who calls me and just talks to me about how hard it is. You know, and I've been there. I know, and I didn't cope well with it at all. And I had nobody to talk to because everyone said, oh, you're blessed, you should be really happy. I wasn't happy. I was miserable, and I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know who to talk to.
Did you want to talk to somebody at the time, looking back?
I didn't even know that was the... yes, I would have done if I'd known that was the solution. Okay. I didn't know that talking about it was the solution because I hadn't been brought up in that environment. I hadn't been brought up to say, you know, around the message that it was okay to talk about difficulties. I wasn't told that it wasn't, but it wasn't a tool that was available to me, you know. It wasn't something that was common in our family. You know, we just got on with it. And so that was what I tried to do. I just tried to get on with it, but I couldn't. And so, you know, to be able to pass on this tool, especially to my male friends, and it's not even passing on, actually, it's not even passing anything on, it's just setting an example, you know. And if my friends or men that I'm talking to are taken aback by it, you know, it's because it's new to them. It's because it's not a natural, normal place that they would normally visit, you know, in order to deal with how they feel, if that makes sense.
Yes, their comfort zone.
Yeah, completely. Because we're just taught to stuff it, and, you know, there's a million different ways to change the way we feel, isn't there? You know, the most common one being our iPhones, probably now. But, you know, I've used food, I've used relationships, I've used drugs, alcohol, shopping, you know, not gambling, thankfully, though that is, you know, a big one for a lot of people. There's a myriad of different ways that we can fall into addictively to change the way we feel. And, you know, a healthy way out of that is to call up a friend who isn't going to be shaming and who's going to just sit and listen and say, you know what, I'm really struggling with being a new dad. And I'm going, I hear you. I hear you, you know, and that's a lot of the time all they need. You don't need to fix. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to be judged. You don't need to be anything. Sometimes a listening ear is all that's required. And I actually think listening is a very difficult skill to learn in and of itself. I'm very much of the Nancy Klein theory that the brain that has the difficulty and the problem, given enough space and time, will almost certainly work through it itself, and you know, you come up with your own solution. So all I do with my friends is I say, I'm here, I hear what you're saying, you know, talk to me.
Does it work the other way around? That you can.
Yeah.
So I guess what you're going to is an ongoing.
So there's some. I wouldn't do it to somebody that was new to talking that way. I would revert to people that I've talked tried and tested that I've talked to that way in the past. But I still very much do talk that way with those people that I've discovered that are safe, you know. And that's what it's about. It's about building trust with friends and family and sometimes professionals that you can talk that way about. And, you know, I started with AA. That didn't last very long. I went on to professional talking therapy after that. And I've done some deeper familial work, experiential therapy as well. And it's just what it's given me is a lot of tools to be able to deal with how I feel instead of using destructive, you know, methods or processes or whatever. So, and sometimes it's just sitting with somebody by a campfire and not saying anything. You know, him with a beer, me with a non-alcoholic beer, and just being, just sitting and being. And talking sometimes around the issue until they get the strength and the courage to actually go into what's really going on for them, and sometimes not saying anything at all. You know, I've sat for hours by a campfire not saying anything to mates and felt so rejuvenated at the end of it.
So you're the guy putting the logs on then?
I'm the guy putting the logs on, everyone else is just staring into it.
Yeah.
And, you know, it works. It works because if nothing else, it's a meditative space that they can just sit and be, and, you know, just not have to think about their troubles or their worries or whatever. They can just stare into the fire and just zone out, you know, and that's sometimes the gateway to starting to talk openly about how you feel. So it's not always an immediate thing. Sometimes it is. It's not always an immediate thing, though. Sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes it takes weeks, months, and sometimes it never happens, sadly. But most of the time, if you give someone permission and a safe space to walk into to talk about their troubles, they will.
Are they the common threads that you find over and over again, those key things?
Yes, I think so. That it's about, first of all, building trust, and then it's about providing a space, and then you really need to kind of let them move into that space and talk and find a moment, a time. Given you know, an amount of time, they'll walk into it and start talking. But not talking about this stuff has only ever caused me stress and problems. And I only ever see stress and problems in others, you know, that have issues and difficulties and challenges. I see mental health problems increase when they don't talk about what's going on.
If you get a group of people together, or even in a small group, is there a sort of a sudden realization that their problems are shared rather than purely theirs?
I think there's a lot a lot of similarities. And actually what you find when you get a lot of guys in a men's group, for example, around a campfire, is that everyone comes from different places, everyone comes from different backgrounds, different incomes, different, societal kind of areas, and everyone has different problems. But when you're sitting around a campfire and you've got the talking stick and you're just talking about what's going on for you, what the difficulties are that you're struggling with, there's a lot of similarities in that, and it's generally that it's not okay to talk about it, and it's like there's a lot of relief that. So I'm here, I'm holding a stick, I'm in front of a fire. This is a really strange thing, but I'm finding, because of the person next to me and the person next to them and the person next to them have already spoken about how they feel, and nobody's even thought twice about it, it's given me the courage to say what I need to say in order for me to feel better. And that's how it works. It's setting an example, if you like, or it's just.
So similar to your guy who you said, was reading your mind almost. When he got
he was talking about his story, but I had so many similarities with how he felt, and there may be some people listening to this that are doing the same, that they're listening to me talk and their kind of light bulbs are going off, and it may leave others cold. But I think intrinsically what it is, it's seeing a bloke talk about feelings. It's just not a common sight, some of my friends sometimes say to me, aren't you worried about what people are going to think about you talking about your feelings like this? And I'm like, well, not really, because the alternative for me is holding it all in and then getting suicidal again, or depressed, or both. Usually both. And it's not a perfect life. It's difficult. We've all got our own struggles. But one thing that we can all do is talk about it. It's just about having the right space and the permission to do it.
I was listening briefly to the podcast to do with the crazy guy.
Oh yeah.
And it was
scary guy.
Scary guy. Sorry,
yeah.
And there's a phrase, a stinking thinking.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what that meant, or how it was relevant, or what happened. So
stinking thinking for me, it's an AA term.
Okay.
And it basically just means when I'm not doing the things I need to do in order for me to take care of myself. So, then my thinking becomes worse. I start internalizing everything, and then it becomes everything that I'm feeling becomes everyone else's fault, and it's just not.
So this goes back to the beginning of the problem again.
So this is it. Yeah, I might be 18 years sober, but I'm only one choice away from a drink, and the only time I start thinking about, shall I have a drink? It's a lovely sunny day. It's a lovely place. It's a perfect time for a beer. Yeah. Fortunately, I have the ability to see where that leads me. Mm-hmm. I have the memories of where that will take me. So I'm able to play that movie to the end and make a different choice. Mm-hmm. No, I'll have a non-alcoholic one. Thanks very much. Or none at all. But what's underneath that, my addiction, if you like, will always be there. My addictive personality will always be there. And what it wants is for me to be on my own. It wants me to be isolated, and it wants me to be negative, and it wants me to make bad decisions so that, I can be an addict again. Sounds slightly strange talking about it in the third person like that, but it's kind of true. It's almost like it's something that's in a pen, it's cordoned off, and I have to do what I need to do on a daily basis to make sure that it stays in its pen and it stays where it is, because otherwise, you know, the stinking thinking gets in, and I start not taking care of myself. I start making bad decisions, and then, you know, before you know it, I'm depressed again, and that can lead to all kinds of different problems. And that does happen over the course of, you know, life in general. You know, with everybody. Everyone has ups and downs. It's not normal to be happy all the time. It's not normal to be sad all the time. What's normal is a gentle wave between the two. You know, we have good times, we have bad times. That's normal. This isn't normal either. You know, like extremely happy, extremely sad, you know, bipolar type kind of issues or feelings, or, you know, extreme emotions. So what we're looking for is that, you know, that gentle wave between, you know, I feel a bit down today, I'm feeling really good today, I feel okay, you know. That's where I like to live my life, between those two. Once it starts moving outside of that, then I know something's not right. I'm not doing something, or I'm doing too much of something, or and that's when I pick up the phone and I talk to a friend, and I go, I don't really know what's going on, but through the course of the conversation, it will inevitably lift, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, and this is the crux of it, is even if I don't know why I'm sad or why I'm low or what I'm feeling, if I pick up the phone or I meet with somebody for coffee, even just saying I just feel low is enough sometimes to make you feel better. You know, you don't have to figure everything out all the time. It's just, sometimes I just need to say, I just feel crap today. And for that to be okay with the other person, that's the important thing, you know, is when that happens to me, is say we meet for a coffee and you say to me, I just feel rubbish today and I don't know what to do about it. And then I jump in and go, well, you could do this, you could do that, you could do the other. Why don't you go for a bike ride? Why don't you do some exercise, try meditation and yoga? And I jump in and try and fix you. It completely defeats the object.
Not listening.
You're not listening. You know, what the correct reply to you saying, I'm just not feeling right today is, I hear you know, tell me more.
Do you have people within your sort of friendship group that now they know who you are and your, you know, the tools you have to sort of move forward? Do they take some of the responsibility for you? So do they jump in and say, how are you doing? Are they proactive now? They know their role? They're
proactive. They can be proactive now, but they know there's a way to do that. And the way to be proactive in a healthy way is to say, can I make a suggestion? Or
it's a very difficult line to tread.
It's not actually. It's really, really clear. You know, either you might say to me, can you give me some feedback? I'm really struggling. And then so my next question to you would be, okay, so what's going on? Tell me what's going on. And then you would tell me what's going on. And then I would maybe say, have you done your daily exercise? Have you done, you know, and then I would go through the things that I know you do that make you feel better and ask you if you've done those, because chances are you haven't. And because I know for me, when I don't do any exercise and I don't do my meditation or my yoga or whatever it is, the things, I eat well, all the things I know that help me stay happy and well and balanced, when I don't do those things, that's when things change. So that's the first thing I would say to somebody who asked me, you know, for feedback, and that's how my friends react when I say to them, I'm just really miserable. Sometimes they don't say anything. I've got one who just looks at me, and I know what that means. You know, it's not a sarcastic look or a you know, it's just a look of knowing. It's like, I know, you know, it's like I've been there, I'm there regularly. Because we have these conversations so often, and you know, there's maybe 5 of them in the world. You know, because of the band, I've got hundreds of thousands of friends on Facebook, and I talk to people that say, oh, this guy's a mate and that guy's a mate, and I said, really? How did you meet them then? I thought, oh, just friends on Facebook. No, it's not the same. You're not friends. Messaging somebody you don't know on Facebook, or somebody inappropriate, is not the same as a one-to-one conversation where you're saying to somebody, how are you? No, how are you? And asking that a second time is really important. So with regard to parents at cherry trees, or maybe the fathers at cherry trees or whatever, that have maybe thought in the past that you don't have anywhere to go with your struggle, with your challenges, with anyone to talk to about that, then I would absolutely say you're never alone. It's about finding the right people to talk to. And maybe that's about forming a group, a men's group yourself, that you can do that safely. Maybe it's about, finding a good talking therapist, a good psychotherapist, or maybe it's about finding a support group. Excuse me. I don't know, but the power of talking to somebody with the same problem that you have or similar issues is a really good start. It's a really good starting point to figure that stuff out.